In 1836, a man laid under a buffalo robe, coated in dried blood, crawling with lice, and stinking like rotwood. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. And that was winter in the Rockies. Not the postcard, but the nightmare. So think about it. Would you burn bone marrow for heat? Rub deer fat on your face just to keep the skin from splitting? Let ants strip the lice from your shirt while you freeze beside a dying fire? Because that's what it took to make it through, and most didn't. In this episode, we'll break down 7 life-saving hacks mountain men used to survive winters in the Rockies back in the day. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Now let's start with the first lesson. Number 7. Firemastery. The cold in the Rockies has no patience. It cuts through your coat, your skin, and right into the bone. Out there, fire is what keeps you from dying. You always kept your flint and steel dry. If they got wet, you were screwed. And when you struck them, it had to be clean. You held the flint just right and brought the steel down sharp. The spark had to hit the tinder dead on. If it missed or bounced off, you'd be there in the dark, hands shaking, trying again while the cold chewed at you. Char cloth was your first line. You made it by burning scraps of old linen in a tin until they turned black and crumbly. But sometimes the cloth got wet, snow got in your bag, or rain soaked through your gear. And when that happened, you had to turn to what you could find. Cedar bark worked best. You peeled off the inner bark, thin as you could, dried it near your chest or under your blanket. That stuff could catch a spark even in bad weather. And you know, everything rode in your possibles bag: tinder, steel, flint, knife. Some men lined theirs with beaver fur just to keep things warm and dry. Smart trick. Wet tools don't work. Also, you couldn't build a fire straight on snow. It would melt the base and sink right through. So you laid green logs in a crisscross, cottonwood or pine if you could get it. You stripped the bark off first. The sap underneath burned slower, helped the base hold longer. That gave your fire a fighting chance. And if you had stones nearby, you used them. Flat ones worked best. You laid them under the fire or stacked them behind it. And once they got hot, they gave off heat for hours. Some cracked from the heat, but they held up long enough to matter. People who rushed it paid the price. One mountain man built his fire on bare snow in a hurry. By midnight, he and his partner were crouched in a puddle. Their moccasins froze stiff. The fire was still going, but it couldn't reach them anymore. Some built reflectors, which are stones stacked behind the fire to bounce heat back toward the bedroll. Others made low walls out of logs or brush angled into the wind, pushing warmth into the shelter. The old tribes knew how to do this. Almost everyone learned it from them. But yeah, you had to know how to shape your fire, not just light it. Build it wrong and the heat went the wrong way. Or worse, the whole thing backfired on you. And you know, some men leaned logs behind the flames instead of stacking them upright. That angled the heat down toward their blankets. But if you messed that up, say built your fire too close to a snow shelf overhead, it could kill you. One man did just that. His fire melted the snow above his shelter while he slept, came down on him like a roof caving in. And yeah, people like to talk about smudge fires keeping bugs away. But in winter, they used them different. Some trappers lit smoldering boughs when they were drying meat to hide the smell from wolves. Others, like the natives, burned damp brush on hunts to steer animals without giving off the scent of open flame. But fire wasn't all comfort. A lot of the time, the smoke choked you. You'd sit there with your face burning, eyes watering like a kicked mule. But if you tried to vent it, the heat escaped too. So you sat in it, held your breath when it got bad. No one complained. You just dealt with it. Another man almost died in a snow cave. He said the ice glazed over the walls and the air got heavy. He had to claw his way up to get air, like an animal. You see, that happens when there's no airflow. CO2 creeps in quietly, doesn't take long to knock you out. So, yeah, winter broke men. Not just their bodies, but their nerves too. Their fingers went stiff and black. Men cried while they rubbed life back into their hands, not because they were weak, but because they couldn't take any more. Cold eats at your will. And you know, some trappers kept two fires. One they slept by, just coals under ash. The other was bigger, burning bright through the night. They lit up the trees like a flare, sometimes to guide someone in, sometimes to scare someone off. And you wouldn't build a fire once and call it done. No, you had to keep feeding it. You had to keep watching it. It could burn too fast and leave you cold. And if it burns too low, it'll vanish before dawn. But yeah, forget the movie heroes who stand tall through the storm. The ledgers tell it straight. 1 in 5 trappers out there lost fingers or toes to frostbite. From 1820 to 1840, cold was the real killer. Not the bear, not the blade, the cold. And although fire kept you alive, what you wore decided if you woke up the next morning or didn't. Number 6, clothing. Indeed, winter in the Rockies was hell wrapped in snow. Imagine your buffalo robe so crusted with dried blood and crawling with lice you could barely sleep. That's not a challenge you can easily overcome. Buffalo hides may not have been cozy, but they sure as hell were shields. The long, greasy outer hair shed snow like it hated the stuff, and the thick wool underneath trapped heat like a furnace. A good buffalo robe, with its hair turned inward, could beat a blizzard better than anything woven back east. Problem was, those hides stank like smoked rotwood. They had to, or the moths would eat them alive. As for beaver, same story. Waterproof on the outside, warm underneath. Folks wore them on their heads as caps. But wear anything for 2 months straight and it becomes a vermin motel. Now, deerskin looked nice, moved well in summer, but when snow got to it, it stiffened like iron. Once there was a mountain man who fell through river ice. His soaked buckskins froze solid. His companions had to carve the clothes off with knives. They sliced the poor man's flesh in the process. The natives knew better. They tanned hides with mashed up brain matter. This kept the leather soft even in cold. But most white trappers didn't learn that trick. Too stubborn, too rushed, or they simply didn't ask. Sweat in your clothes during the march, and you'll freeze the moment the sun dips. So, mountain men stripped to their shirts when walking, piled back on once they stopped. Hudson's Bay blankets were gold, not because they looked good, but because they held heat even when wet. And now, let's talk about finding your way when the world turns white. Number 5. Winter navigation. The winter of 1836 hit the Rockies like a hammer. Cold settled in your bones and stayed there. Out here, maps didn't come on paper. They came in the shape of rivers, tree lines, and stars. Frozen rivers were mountain men's roads. Madison, Snake, Yellowstone. They'd walk their icy backs like they were trails laid down just for them. When they're frozen solid, you follow them. If you wander off, the cold will find you. Simple as that. It is said that native folks used those iced-up rivers like highways, easier than dragging your boots through deep forest snow. But ice is a liar. One wrong bend, and you're boxed in by cliffs, stuck with nowhere to climb, nowhere to go, just your own tracks fading behind you. You'll only end up walking yourself straight into a canyon shaped like a jail cell and not even know it till you're in too deep. Quick note, if this kind of story grabs you, check out the rest of our channel when you're done. We've got more frontier survival tricks and full episodes digging deep into the lives of the legends you're hearing about. But anyways, out there, when the sky turned white and the world went blind, the only thing you had left was instinct and the stars. Polaris, the North Star, this was a mountain man's anchor. And you know, that kind of skill was learned, sometimes borrowed. The Nez Perce, who'd lived in these mountains longer than any mapmaker, taught trappers to watch the skies. Patterns in the stars meant changes were coming, but it was the Anishinaabe who named Orion the Winter Maker. Whenever it rose in the dusk, winter followed. Out here, trappers borrowed whatever wisdom worked. If a constellation dipped low or changed in season, they paid attention because the stars didn't lie. Not out here. Still, not every man listened, and faith alone won't save you out here. The stars don't promise, they just point. Also, out here, height meant life. You didn't just pick a campsite by where it looked good. No, you picked it by what it gave you. Elevation told you what was coming, and when you camped on ridges, you could see a day's trouble coming. But if you couldn't see far, you couldn't last long. Modern digs back that up. Archaeologists found old trapper shelters in the Green River Valley. Rough stone, bone bits, fire pits angled away from snowdrift lines. Trappers always camped near game trails with wide sight lines. Not for the view. For warning. For dinner. For defense. The natives did the same. One of their elders, Yellow Otter, said they wintered on the breasts of the mountains, where the wind sings loudest, but the enemy's feet crunch louder still. In other words, survival meant hearing the storm before it hit, and being the hunter before he struck. Animals told their own kind of truth. Elk pulling back to the timberline meant snow. Wolves down in the valleys meant you had a break. And when the beaver seals his lodge thick, then you better prepare for hard cold. But you know, that whole idea of the lone mountain man, just a man and his instinct, reading the land like a book? Most of that's movie talk. Beckworth loved to tell stories like that. Said he led a brigade through a snowstorm by catching moonlight off his jackknife. It sounds good in a saloon, but when you follow a false star or a whiskey dream, you'll end up frozen hard as flint, with your face turned east as if pleading for a dawn that never came. And even if you managed to find your way, you still had to quench winter's thirst. Number 4, water sourcing. In the dead of winter, finding water got tricky. Snow's everywhere, yeah, but eat it raw, and you're just digging your own grave. It drops your core temp fast. Eating snow to quench thirst is certain destruction to the Constitution. Instead, you ought to melt it by the fire. The problem was, not everyone had a kettle, and if you didn't, you had to improvise. Heated stones were the go-to. Archaeologists found the signs. Fire-busted rocks and old bison bones in Green River Valley. Back then, that was tech. The natives had it down: toss hot stones into hide-lined snow pits, let it melt, scoop the water from the bottom. No gear, just know-how. And if you did have a tin cup or a kettle, you guarded it like your life depended on it, because it did. A tin cup is worth its weight in beaver plues, and without it, you might as well suck icicles. Tempting, sure, but every icy gulp bled warmth straight from your core. Do that long enough, and you're gone. Now sometimes snow wasn't even an option. Too dirty, full of ash from your own fire. So you looked for moving water. But rivers were locked under ice. That's where trees came in. Cottonwoods especially. Wherever you saw narrow-leaf cottonwoods, water wasn't far. Maybe just a few feet underground. The problem was, getting to it took time and energy. More than you usually had. And yet, people still get it wrong. Movies show trappers chomping snow like it's nothing, but that'll kill you faster than hunger. Some mountain men's lips would swell shut, black with frostbite, just from eating snow. Now you don't mess with the cold like that. Survival meant slowing down, melting snow, and keeping it from freezing back up. It took time. It took patience. By February, even metal started to quit. Ice jammed up the spouts. Stones lost their heat fast. Some men stuffed snow under their shirts, hoping body warmth would melt it. Then they'd suck the wet out of their sleeves. Snow had layers too. Not all of it was equal. Wind-blasted slopes held what they called depth hoar. It was basically grainy, fragile snow that melted quicker than the dense stuff. Mountain men used to cut those layers into blocks, like rough bricks, and then stack them by the fire. Then they'd let them drip slow into a cup. It wasn't much, but enough to keep going. That was the game. Risk your warmth for water. Spend your strength for a few sips. Every drink was a trade-off, and the Rockies didn't care if you lost. So yeah, water in the Rockies was everywhere, and yet somehow it was still hard to get. But you know, even if you quenched your thirst, the cold wasn't done with you just yet. You still had to survive your own body. Number 3, health and hygiene. Out in the Rockies, your fingers blackened, your lungs filled. You bled into your mittens and tried not to notice. A cough in the morning could turn into a grave by sundown. Out here, hygiene was all about staying alive. Back then, between the 1830s and the 1860s, trappers figured things out the hard way. When they didn't freeze, they got infected. And when they didn't starve, something in their gut would twist wrong. And yet somehow, some of them made it. They learned from the land. They learned from the tribes. They used what they had: animal grease, tree bark, instinct, and pain. The natives showed mountain men how to fix cracked hands with grizzly fat and crushed yarrow. It worked better than anything shipped in from London or Paris. If your skin breaks in that cold, you're bleeding into your snowshoe straps. That's how infection starts. When bear fat ran dry, mountain men switched to deer tallow. Rubbing it on your face before the wind hit would turn the wind's teeth to blunt things. So yeah, you either figured out what worked or you paid for it with skin. And we're not just guessing here. Dig teams found bison bladder pouches at old campgrounds near Green River, stained with the same lipids from bear and deer fat. These were basically medicine kits in an untamed world without doctors. And when fever hit, or a blade slipped and bit into your leg, they turned to willow bark. The Nez Perce and other native tribes boiled red willow bark into tea to ease pain, a practice passed down long before trappers showed up. The bark held salicin, a natural compound similar to what ended up in early aspirin. And while some trappers caught on, others didn't. Even today, tests on old fire pit remains, places trappers once sat, show that bark still packs the same punch. Salicin levels high enough to match the patent meds folks were buying back east. And hey, if you want more brutal frontier survival stories, then don't forget to hit our channel after you're done watching this. It's all there. Hours-long episodes, short episodes. You'll love it. But for now, have you ever heard someone say, rub snow on frostbite? Not only is that bad advice, it's a death sentence. One mountain man back in the day stuck frostbit toes too close to a fire. It thawed them fast. He lost everyone to gangrene. The natives had a better way. You simply had to wrap the limb in fur. It slows the blood back in, lets the body catch up. It wasn't gentle, but it worked. Now, imagine being stuck in a frozen camp for weeks. Same clothes, same stink, same bites. You've got a whole new problem now. Lice? Lice will irritate you. They will drive you mad. One method, passed around from the old camps, involved tossing your shirt onto an anthill. That's right, ants would swarm in and pick off the lice. It was crude, but it worked. Mostly. You got the shirt back full of holes, but at least it wasn't crawling with vermin. And you know, some trappers said black ants did the job best. But as for red ants, they burned like fire and shredded the fabric. You had to choose your misery. However, most of what passed for medicine out there was a mix of indigenous know-how and making do. A mountain man gashed his leg bad once, obsidian flake cut deep. What did he do? He packed it with mashed wild garlic and a spiderweb. The natives had done it long before. Civil War surgeons would later validate that combo: natural antiseptic and clotting. And if your stomach had gone sideways from bad meat or foul water, then choke cherry root tea was the go-to. Early mountain men picked up fast that the Shoshone knew how to treat gut trouble. One of their go-to fixes was chokecherry root tea. It settled the stomach and stopped the worst of it. You see, when you're out in the cold with no outhouse and no backup, a remedy like that wasn't optional. So yeah, once again, that's what made trapper medicine what it was. Part tradition, part invention, part lies. And under all that, one rule: if it worked, you kept doing it. If it didn't, well, someone else wrote your story. And hey, if you're still alive by now, then guess what? Tomorrow demands a lot more creativity. You've still got a lot of outsmarting to do. Number 2, resourcefulness. Up in the Absarokas, the wind screamed. Cold cut through layers like a knife through rawhide. Every mountain man knew that scream, knew what it meant. And if a storm comes hard one night, you'll have no backup. Just the pack on your back, your hands, and what you'd learned by nearly dying a few times too many. You didn't carry much, 27 pounds, give or take. More than 30, and you moved too slow. And in the mountains, slow could kill you. Survival depended on a knife, fire steel, and knowing how to make one thing do 20 jobs. Water often came in a buffalo bladder, cleaned out, greased with tallow, stitched shut with sinew. That trick came from the locals. Greased right, it wouldn't crack, even in deep freeze. And when gear failed, and it always did, you patched it fast. If your coat tore, you grabbed what you had: a quill, some sinew, maybe a bone needle. You fixed it right there in the cold. Archaeologists still find the proof: beads, quills, broken needles in the ash beds of old camps. Then came the whiteout. Twilight, no stars. Just snow tearing sideways across your face. You didn't run, you dug. You made a hole just big enough to lie in, then stacked snow around it tightly. And if you built it wrong, you woke up half frozen, or not at all. Indigenous scouts had been building snow walls longer than any of the fur men, and they built them thick, as long as a horse, according to old stories. The trappers copied the idea, but cut corners too often. But yeah, a real mountain man's kit ought to be lean and mean. A Hawken rifle, 8 traps, 3 flints, a couple of awls, 10 pounds of pemmican, 1 blanket, 1 kettle. That's it. No extras. And that's what we call the survival load. Anything more, and you'd be dragging yourself over passes while war parties or hunger caught up from behind. Now, some of that snow digging we talked about earlier could fall under shelter, sure. But true shelter runs deeper. And since this is the last one on our list, let's get into it. Number 1, shelter. Winter up in the Rockies didn't care who you were, greenhorn or grizzled. You either figured it out or the mountain buried you. Back in the day, nobody was building cozy cabins. Mountain men liked lean-tos small enough to be mistaken for a grave. Pine poles, rawhide, and nothing more. You'd stack juniper boughs on the floor, crush them, and you'd get this sharp, clean scent, almost like camphor. And so, when the storms rolled in hard, sometimes you had no choice but to go under. That's what we call snow caves. Dangerous as they come, but if it's death outside, you dig. The smart mountain man would lay pine boughs on the inside walls to trap a layer of still air. That trick alone could raise the inside temp by 12 degrees. And if you found a cave or rock overhang in winter, you were lucky. But luck out there always came with a catch. Back in 1805, Lewis and Clark's crew got stranded near what's now Dillon, Montana. They crammed themselves under a limestone ledge. One could imagine how their breath froze right to the rock above their heads, turning the walls against you. Years later, trappers stumbled onto those same kinds of spots. You could still see black streaks on the cave walls, old soot from fires burned long before them. But snow caves, though, nothing like the movies. If you dig wrong, you're digging your own grave. And the funny thing is, indigenous folks had better shelter systems all along. The Nez Perce didn't waste time on bad shelters. When winter hit, they built wickiups. Now these were tight, fast, and warm. Frame made from willow or whatever flexible poles they had on hand. They covered it with dry grass, bark, hides. You could put one up fast, and it worked. Held in heat, blocked the wind, didn't collapse under snow if you built it right. That knowledge came from generations of doing it the hard way. After all, they were semi-nomadic, moving with the seasons. So their shelters had to be portable, easy to rebuild, and tough enough to stand up to the cold. And they were. Meanwhile, as mentioned earlier, most white trappers stuck with lean-tos, bare-bones setups, logs or poles leaned against a crossbeam, maybe covered with pine boughs or a blanket if you were lucky. It was better than nothing, though, but not by much. You see, the wind got in, the heat got out. You could freeze stiff with a fire still burning 10 feet away. And so, in the Rockies, survival came down to one truth. Every spark, every scrap of warmth was a tiny victory against winter's endless hunger.